Would Microsoft really ever leave the gaming market with Xbox? It's a little bit more complicated than you might think. By now, we're all aware of the massive Xbox leak, and I'm currently going through quite literally every piece of document and email and everything else, and the big headlines have already been made. Microsoft might leave the Xbox arena behind. We're going to abandon our gamers if Game Pass doesn't have some weird growth numbers or something like that. And so those headlines are great for clicks. However, when you really dig through the documents of what Phil Spencer was saying to basically his team and the leadership team at Microsoft, you begin to understand why that this headline was really just a tragic clickbait-based articles and really nothing else. So I've dug through a bunch of it. I've kind of done some historical context here. So let's kind of talk about how Microsoft got to this point of trying to be on the bad side of some PR headlines. So the chart heard around the world was this specific chart, came up in an email that was shared to Phil Spencer, and he was brought up in court and through all these ABK and acquisition trials and everything else, and he was asked about this, and he basically said, look, if those were the numbers that we have seen, then we're probably exiting the game business. And what he really was saying here, and this is where it gets taken completely out of context, is that this growth is not aggressive enough. Specifically on that console side, that lower green quadrant is where we are primarily going to take our focus, because that is growth that we expect to see significantly climb. And Phil Spencer has again already acknowledged that the data and information shared throughout this trial is outdated. And so this particular chart was shared to him based from an external team who wasn't really privy to all of what was going on inside the world of Xbox, especially when it comes to acquisitions, because Phil Spencer has noted that the primary driver of it, at least the way they see it right now, is through consoles. So if they want to increase Game Pass subscriber counts, they have to increase the number of consoles sold, because that is their best top of funnel, as it would be referred to in the marketing community, is getting people into that funnel who might buy it. So if you have a console, the likelihood of you buying Xbox Game Pass is pretty darn high. So how did this kind of quote get blown out of proportion here? So in the emails, Phil said, I can fairly safely say that if we do not make more progress than this off of console, we would exit the gaming business. If this were the outcome, we would, pausing, I don't believe, still be in business. So if you think about what Microsoft is doing, Microsoft is trying to spend nearly $70 billion dues to grow that bottom green segment. Yes, there are other assets inside of ABK that will help grow other segments, but we're primarily focusing on the consoles here. So they're spending a portion of that $70 billion expecting that green portion to grow. Now, if you look at the actual numbers that are presented here, starting all the way on the far left, the green is somewhere, I don't know, you could probably say somewhere between 35 like 37 million subscribers based on that particular fiscal year. And you can see the other mid-gen consoles, which I think is someplace we should actually focus our eyes, because that gets closer to the 40 million. Now, it looks like, based on everything we have known, that this chart was created by a team that did not take into consideration the ABK acquisition, that $70 billion, because right around that mid-gen cycle line, right, is roughly speaking a little bit to the right, would be when the next Call of Duty releases. Now, we don't expect this current generation Call of Duty, at least day one sort of thing, land in Game Pass. However, if you are building this chart and you're thinking, well, how much are his console sales going to grow based on our future stuff? You would think that there would be a pretty sizable bump in that green segment once the next Call of Duty is released and it is included in Game Pass. And as you can see, there is no notable bump here from that, which is why I believe Phil Spencer went on to say what he actually did, which is this. He says, I do not believe that this is what the future Xbox business would look like, Spencer said of this particular slide that I'm showing, the bottom portion. This is a presentation from our devices and organization team to gaming leadership. So this is a view from that team, or from the team that is chartered with building our hardware on what the future business would look like. So now, with more actual context, he says, a majority of our customers are found off of our own hardware. I would hope that by earlier than 2030. So he's expecting us to hit those milestones, or Microsoft to hit those milestones before 2030. So when you ask me if I agreed with this chart, with the light green and blue, depending on the colors you see there, would have to be much larger, much earlier. I would say by fiscal 26, that's calendar year 27, then we should be in a position, or we'd have to make a different decision with the business. TLDR of this is like, look, if we don't hit some significant growth metrics based on spending $70 billion, then the gaming industry, or this particular segment, Xbox, is in trouble. This is not unusual, everybody. Like, if this sounds like shocking that, hey, we're going to make a $70 billion investment in this segment of the business. If we don't see considerable growth from $70 billion, how else can we spend money to get growth? Because clearly throwing more content at it is not a driver, a metric that is achievable. Because when you're in a business like this, you look for business models that work. And this is going to sound really plain and generic, but one is like, okay, if we spend $1 billion on content, how many subscriber growth can we see? Microsoft likely has this number within within reasons of like expectations, because they've already spent billions on acquiring content, right? They've acquired many studios over the year, and they know that adding certain types of titles and certain types of content, they will see a result of growth inside of Game Pass. So when Phil Spencer is looking at this and thinking, man, back in my head, we're looking at spending $70 billion. I know that for every billion we spend, we see X amount of million subscribers sign up for Game Pass, and I don't see that reflected here on the valuation of spending this $70 billion. And that is why he is looking at this going like, man, if we don't continue those metrics of growth based on our own projections, then yeah, this business doesn't make sense, because what else can we do to grow it? And if we can't grow this business, then maybe it doesn't make sense for Microsoft, right? Microsoft is a business. They're in the business of making money. And if they can't find a business model to make more money selling hardware, consoles, and games, then what are they doing? And so that is sort of more of the ethos that I got from this particular email. The emails surrounding this conversation, by the way, also sort of hit on the same idea that, hey, we expect certain amount of growth based on acquiring these studios. We have to hit that. I mean, you guys have to understand that when you are a business executive and you are walking into the boardroom saying, I want to spend $70 billion to acquire a studio, that is a bet your career type moment. Companies aren't just going to let you spend $70 billion and then just be like, nope, sorry, it didn't work out. You know what? Just have a good day. Like, that is not how Phil Spencer and the Xbox leadership team, and honestly, probably some of the Microsoft leadership team, are quite literally betting their careers that by acquiring ABK, they can turn Xbox into a really sustainable, healthy business and win the segment. That is not, I'm not trying to like make things up here. This is the feelings that you get and just the logic that is applied to a chart like this, saying that is not what we have to do. We have to be better than that after spending this kind of money. And realistically, Microsoft exiting the game business is not a new narrative. Actually, Microsoft probably has conversations internally, I would bet, across the board about every single entity, like, should we be in this business? That is a healthy thing that businesses do. Should we be in the business of making Windows Phone? Should we be in the business of making Zune hardware? Should we be in the business of Surface? These are all questions that some haven't been answered, right? Windows Phone and Zune. Surface is going through its own moment right now. Like, does it make sense to be a PC maker? Because, hey, the margins aren't there. Panos Panay just left. And so businesses do this from time and time. And so when you get to, like, should Microsoft spin it out? It's not the first time this has been brought up. Back in 2013, Paul Allen, who rest in peace, or rest his soul, I should say, his investment chief was like, hey, Microsoft should at least consider spinning out Xbox and Bing. And this was back in 2013. Industry has changed a lot. But again, it's not the first time that this thing has been brought up. So the question becomes, like, how we don't know what Microsoft's real projections here are. These are outdated. Phil Spencer has already noted that Microsoft is going to close ABK, which is expected roughly before October 18th, but more than likely sometime between October 6th and October 18th, they should get their final approval, and then that wire transfer will take place, and Microsoft will close the deal. And then it's off to the races. Microsoft is committed, and they are going after this community and this gaming segment because they believe that games as a service is the model of the future. There's other context floating around about there about how, hey, old legacy publishers like Take-Two and EA really got this moat built by retailers by saying, like, look, store shelves used to be the moat. Like, if you want to get your game on a store shelf, it was insanely difficult. However, today, to get your game into a digital game store is very easy. So these legacy publishers lost a bit of their moat, and it's become harder for them. And so they're, basically relying on these big titles such as Grand Theft Auto, the Maddens, those sorts of things to really drive growth. However, Game Pass might be a better model, but it's a shift for the industry, and it's tough to go through a shift, which is what we see Microsoft doing right now. Microsoft wants to be known as a subscription games company, and that is why this chart does not make sense, because it doesn't take into account everything that Microsoft had in play, and that is why those headlines are not right. So there's going to be a lot more of this as I continue to read around, but when I just, I get, every time I tweet something on X or Twitter or whatever, and I was like, X doesn't matter, Xbox is going to lead the game industry. Now I have a video to point those people to. So there you go. As always, everybody, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.